This is Damian Macy of the Friends of the Marshall Public Library, and today I am with Mary Jane Bender, and today is Friday, September the 16th. And with that, we're going to start an interview, and here is Mary Jane.
Well, I've never done this before, but we're liable to jump all around, okay? My family history goes way back in Marshall to the Shaw family. So I have actually lived in many of the Shaw homes in my lifetime. As a young girl, I lived in the house where Joe Rich lives. Joe's got a new last name. I can't think of what it is, but that's where I lived when I was in kindergarten. In that house, my mom and dad rented that house from Margaret Shaw. But when I got married, I lived in the house that my great-great-grandfather built. And my great-grandmother lived there till she was 100 years old and died when she was 100.
Going back just a second to the house where the Shaw house on 7th Street, was the front porch and everything that way?
No, well, it was when I was a girl. Okay. But originally it was not.
Right.
And I have seen that picture, and I wish I knew what happened to that picture. I think one of Wilford's grandchildren has it. When they cleaned out that house. That's when I saw it, when they were here and cleaned out that house, and I wonder if one of them doesn't have it, have taken the picture of it. But this is actually my great-great-grandmother right there, and
her name was?
Mary Jane.
Mary Jane, well, how about that?
And she was Mary Jane Shaw, became Mary Jane Bryan. We have the same initials.
We do. Sure do.
And this is her, and we look alike. We have the same square jaw.
Sure do.
Yep. And this is her husband. And this is their daughter, which is my great-grandmother. So this is James C. Bryan, Mary Jane Bryan, and Margaret Bryan Hogue. Margaret Hogue would have been my great-grandmother, who I lived in their house, both upstairs and downstairs. James C. Bryan was had a seat in the House of Representatives in Springfield. This is a letter written from home to my grandmother, my great-grandmother, while he was serving. It's very hard to read because they don't use any punctuation.
And what year was that?
1882.
So the capital at that time had been moved to Springfield.
Springfield.
Okay.
Yeah. It says State of Illinois General Assembly House of Representatives on that. It's got there. So this is where we do look alike.
Sure do.
And this is her sister Minerva, and that was Mary Cole's grandmother.
Okay.
That's how we're related. And this is William Shaw, and that was Wilford Shaw's grandfather. Okay?
Yeah, I knew Wilford very well.
Wilford. John Shaw never lived, he moved out, he didn't stay around here, and Albert is the one that there was a whole diary written about in the Marshall paper. Delanne, his wife was Virginia Drake, which is a relative of the Huffingtons, and it's the diary of when they left Marshall and moved out west.
Wow.
Albert and Virginia. And this is the gathering that was held for them before they left town. And these are all this is the family.
Where was that picture taken? Do you know that?
Where? It's taken at the house where their house, right at at the dining room door, the door at the dining room, and that's where Keith and Marty Burton live now. Okay,
that's what
it's taken at that house.
Okay.
Out, on the south side, at the dining room door. Yep. So I was actually, was born and raised here and lived here all my life. Now that I'm retired, I live half the year in Florida. Leave the cold for where it's warm. But actually, the house I live in today faces the house I was born in. My mom and dad lived when I was born, where they lived when I was born. So I've come full circle, back where I started.
You have stayed in one spot.
One spot, pretty much.
That's interesting.
Pretty much, yep.
Do you remember the early neighbors or the type of neighborhood that was when you were a youngster?
When I was very, very small when we left that house. So no, I don't really, but I spent a lot of time there because my grandparents lived on the other corner.
Okay.
So as a little girl growing up, and then my parents moved to a house on Beach Street, between 3rd and 4th Street on Beach. They bought a house over there after we moved from several rental places. We landed there in a house on Beach Street where Rhonda Kern and her husband live right now. Our house faced Lydia Trev's house. If you ever remember Lydia Trev's?
Yes, I remember the name.
She was a neat old lady, a single lady. And our neighbors were Jim and Maud Horton. The Hortons were great people. I enjoyed them. They never had any children, but she babysat with me sometimes.
Did you get some favors probably, didn't you?
Yeah, they were a great couple, little old farm couple, you know. And I have my fondest memories, I would say, of my childhood are around my grandparents' house. You know, growing up there with the older people, because I always had both my grandparents and a great grandmother. I mean, I was married when she passed away at 100, my great grandmother. So I have always had. Nowadays, it's not unusual to have great grandparents, but it was back then. It was back then. I think I was the only kid in my class that had a great grandparent.
Now, did you have some brothers and sisters?
I have a sister that's 2 years older than me, Margaret. Yeah. We ran the neighborhood. My neighbors were like Margie Richardson. She and I ran the neighborhood. Yeah, David Raridan. I can tell some funny stories on those two as kids. Yeah. And the house lived when my parents lived when I was born, had a garage, and my dad, well, he didn't burn it down, but it burned down while we were living there, and my dad never had a garage after that.
Didn't rebuild.
No, in any house we ever lived in, he never had a garage after that.
Unusual.
He never had a place to put his car, and that garage burnt down with our car in it.
Oh gosh.
At that time. But I did have I just had the best childhood in that neighborhood. Back then, I mean, we just had, the kids have no idea how easy it was a wonderful time to grow up.
I bet, Mary Jane, you did not have a lot of yard equipment for toys and stuff. You had to make your own fun, didn't you?
Well, you went to the pool in the summertime. It was always go to the pool, yeah, and ride your bike to the pool. And my grandfather had a soil testing laboratory in the basement of that house. And I tried to avoid him as much as possible because he always had a job for me to do. We had to wash test tubes, a lot of test tubes. And it was not my favorite job. But he never let you be idle. There was always something you could be doing. If we played checkers, if there was a baseball game in the side yard, Margie and I made mud pies in his driveway out of his garden. He always had a huge garden. And I would get out there and eat the peas out of his garden. I'll just sit there in the garden and eat peas. He had an orchard.
Did your granddad or your dad ever say, my grandfather's phrase was, idle hands are the devil's workshop.
Nope, they never did. I never did hear that from them. My granddad Lovett was a great guy, super. And when my son was growing up, we have home movies, you know, that we had put on tape so we could watch them. The kids, and my son watching those said he said, oh, he looks like a neat guy. He said, I wish I'd known him. And I said, he would have loved you. Yep. I wish they had. Yeah.
At least you've got those as memories too.
Oh yeah, we have the movies, yeah. But now, you can't watch them on tape anymore. We've had to actually put them from tape to DVDs. I don't know, I guess we'll put them on a Fire Stick next. Things evolve and then you're stuck with, lots of stuff. Lots of stuff. When I lived in the big house, Mary Cole's house, I inherited that house. When I lived in that house, I became the keeper because I had the room. I had a huge attic, and I became the keeper. And sometimes that can be a burden.
Oh, I know.
Everybody said, well, you've got room, put them in your attic, you know. So when we downsized into this little 2-bedroom house, we had to become the keeper. I had to say, I sent out an email, and I moved into my grandmother's house when my grandmother and great-grandmother died. We lived upstairs in an apartment, Larry and I, then we moved downstairs into her furniture. We moved from there. We kept getting moved. My mom and aunt decided to sell the house. We had to find some place to live. We ended up in federal housing. Wow. Because we couldn't find any place else to go. And we had to find something then. We had to find something now. So we had a 2-bedroom there. Then my grandmother Kyle needed to go to the nursing home, and my dad had to sell her house, and Uncle Wayne lived with her, Wayne Kyle. And so they said, Uncle Wayne and Aunt and Grandma, when she got done with her rehab at the nursing home, if we would move out, they could have our place in federal housing. So we had to find some place to live. Larry and I got moved again. We found a house to rent. And then we moved from, then the people that we rented from decided to sell that house, and we bought a house. That's when we bought our first home. But we were married 4 years and moved 5 times.
Wow.
In 4 years. And then after we acquired children, we stayed in one place longer. But we had to keep moving so people could have a place to live, you know. So kind of funny.
I like that.
Yeah. But anyway.
That's moving, maybe. Did you go to the old North Side School, or where did you go to school?
I went to North School, yeah. Margie and I walked to school. And then, my mom taught school. And back in those days, this was when we lived, on Beach Street. We had one car, and my dad worked in Paris, and my mom taught at South School. And so my dad took our one car to work every day. Margaret and I, of course, we were too young to drive anyway, but we would go over to my grandmother's, okay, in the morning and my grandfather would pick up my mom and take her to school. And then we would stay at my grandmother's till it was time to walk to school. So we walked from their house, and then when we were done at school, we walked back there. We always walked.
Do you remember your early teachers?
Oh yeah, yeah. Don't know if I remember first grade. Not sure if I had Mrs. Schaller for second grade, but I had Mrs. Buckner, Mrs. Baker for 4th, Mrs. Sweet for 5th, and Mrs. Irwin for 6th. I don't know if I remember. Oh, and kindergarten was at the Ohio School, and my mother taught kindergarten at the time. And at that time, you went to school every other day, I think it was, all day, every other day. So you had a day that you didn't go. And I stayed with my grandmother Lovett. And then if my grandmother Lovett was busy, and my teacher was Mrs. Titus. No, she was my kindergarten teacher, next door where my mom was teaching. But if my grandma was going to be gone when I was out of school, I went to Mrs. Kyle's class, stayed in the back, and kept my mouth shut.
Hard to do sometimes, isn't it?
That was my orders. Come to school with me, but you just stay back there. This is not your classroom. And be quiet. Okay. So, but we ate, as a kid, I mean, living over just a block away, we ate regularly at my grandparents' house. My mom and dad and my sister and I, every Sunday and then when I was at the North School in grade school, I think I was in 6th grade when all this happened. Seems like. My great-grandmother fell and broke her hip in the church basement at the May Day breakfast. And then she was in her 90s when that happened. And then my grandmother fell and broke her hip in the kitchen the same year. So we had 2 invalids. So therefore, my mom our meals, my mom would come home from school teaching, and that's where we had supper every night with them. I think my grandfather, he died when I was in junior high. He died. He had stomach cancer and had part of his stomach removed when I was like 4th grade, and then by junior high, it got him. Yeah.
Do you remember the interior of that old school? I went the first.
Oh, yeah.
I went my first 4 grades there.
Oh, yeah, I do. Mm-hmm.
And it was very
the big open space in the middle, and the classrooms were on in the corners.
And the cloakrooms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you had a cloakroom behind there where you hung up and
and
left your lunch pail.
It was early, but anyway, Von Arnie came to the school for music, and we went way up in the attic.
Oh, no, I was in the attic, but we didn't use the attic.
Now, and there was a piano up there, and we had music classes.
Our music was in the basement, and Libby Wells came, and we had music in the we had our class in the basement, and that's also a lunchroom. If you brought your lunch, you sat down there and ate lunch in that same room in the basement.
It was before the days of public or city schools having lunches, or any of the schools having lunch programs.
Yeah, I either walked home for lunch and back, or took my lunch. Yeah. So, yeah.
Do you remember recess or what you did then?
Oh yeah, recess was baseball, which I hated because I was never good at baseball, but I like kickball, and what was that game you played?
There were some swings.
There was some, yeah, they had swings.
The slide, and I think teeter-totter.
And I think I remember that different grades had different sides of the playground. You were in this grade, you were over here. If you were in this grade, you were on this side. You had different areas of the playground that you played in. Yeah.
If you fell and skinned your knee, you just put some water on it, cleaned it up, and went on.
And went on. Yeah. And then, let's see. Yeah, that was 6th grade, and then junior high was just like it is now. Yeah, by junior high, we'd moved up to 8th Street. I didn't live down there by my grandparents anymore. Yeah. But I have a lot of good memories of growing up in my childhood in Marshall. It's an easy place, and it's still an easy place to live. It's still very comfortable, safe.
There's the key, safe.
Safe, easy place for retirees to live. It is. Why do you think so many people move in here that never lived here before? Their kids living here, and so they move in here too. It's a nice,
or you live someplace else
town.
And move back.
And you move back. You do. Yeah. Because it's easy.
Yep.
Safe, nice little town. I'm always ready to come back from our Florida home to a place where I can be at Walmart in 5 minutes and be back home, you know, where I don't have to fight traffic. Yeah.
There's probably only 2 cars backed up at the stoplight too.
Yeah, yeah. And you can get through in one light. Yeah. So, yeah, junior high was when we moved up to 8th Street. And that was a great move actually for a kid for my age, because I moved into a neighborhood of kids my age, you know. Marjan Schaller, Mindy Mealing, Barbara Ilias, Becky Edwards, Jeannie Sathree, Bev Bubeck, Dawn Ferris, Ken Claypool, Scott Arney. We had a whole Debbie Ashley, we had a whole 2 streets full of kids our age. So it was a great neighborhood to grow up in, you know. There was always something going on in the summertime.
It's amazing those neighborhoods change. Mm-hmm. They become pretty much retirees, and now then they're back to...
They're coming back to the young people.
Many young families.
Yes, because that neighborhood was so many old people, and almost within just a few years, they all...
You said old?
Well, older, okay, older. But within a few years, it's just like the Mealings, the Schallers and the Mealings and Rosa, and all of a sudden, everything changed. And in fact, David and Joyce Lewis, you know, Joyce said when we moved in here, we were the young family.
Yeah, that's right.
We were the young family with children. And now, they're the older family.
Exactly.
And all the new young people that have moved in around with children, you know. And she said, now I feel like the oldest person here. So, yeah, it did change. We were, and then being close to the Tasty Freeze, and everybody walked, you know, at night. You didn't feel threatened to walk at night, you know, go somewhere at night. Did a lot of that, and I had at that age, and that I remember in that house we had chores to do, and my parents, my mother teaching school on weekends, she divided up our house. My sister had 2 rooms to clean, and I had 2 rooms to clean, and she cleaned the kitchen and her bedroom. And once we got our 2 rooms cleaned, we were free to go for the day. Get your work done, get your rooms cleaned, and you can go. And
as a youngster, did you have some hobbies, and maybe you carried some of those into later life even?
Nah. Yeah, no, not really. I did try the piano. I did play the piano for a while, which is something I wish I had carried into adulthood, because I really respect piano players like you. I really respect people who have that talent. I love to go to a piano bar and listen to somebody play, you know. I mean, it's just, I just enjoy the piano music. And in that big house on 8th Street, I had 2 pianos. And I pick at it. I did teach my granddaughter how to play. And when she was little, I taught her, and she sat down at the piano one Christmas and played Away in the Manger for her mom and dad, and they did not know she knew anything about the piano. We did it without anybody knowing. And they could tell it was Away in the Manger. And then as an older child, she's a senior this year, but then she played the flute. So then she really got to learning music. I had showed her the basics to play the piano, but then playing the flute, she understood how to read music because she was old enough to figure it out. And she ended up with one of the pianos in her basement. And the other piano is a baby grand, and you can't just put them in a pickup truck and move them. So it's still in that house. It's still there.
In Cole?
In Cousin Mary's house, in that house. Yeah, it's still there.
Good.
I don't know. It's got a place. I was going to get rid of it when I moved there, and my son said, Mom, that piano is Cousin Mary's house. You can't move it. So I didn't.
Good point.
And yeah, he said it is her house. So it's a beautiful piano. It really is. But it needs a lot of work. You know, it needs a lot of work. So I don't know. The kids that bought that house love that house. And I said, I am so happy because I loved living there. I really did love that house.
Plenty of elbow room.
It's just with 3 fireplaces downstairs and 1 upstairs. You know, you lived in a big house. I just loved it. It just had character. It was just fun to live in.
But Mary Jane, as you said earlier, the more space you have, the more you tend to squirrel away.
Yeah, you feel it. Yeah, but the stairs. I knew that we were going to need, and I thought, and so as soon as somebody came up and said, "We want to buy your house, will you sell it?"
Yes.
And I said, "Sure." And so it was time. And I'm okay with it. My family, I know, my grandchildren were the ones that threw the biggest fit. And they still don't let me live it down. They love, my grandchildren, not my children, my grandchildren loved that house. Which endears me, because I love that they loved the old house.
With the youngsters, they can hop upstairs and downstairs.
Yeah.
No problem.
Well, yeah, I could hardly ever find them. We had 2 stairways, the front and back stairs, and they were always one place, it was like, stop, so I can find you.
Know how that goes.
They had the best time there. They did. It probably, I guess I was about 15, because I didn't have a license when I started working at Hedges store. I worked retail at Hedges. I worked for Ray and Betty. And they were like second parents to me. I mean, I worked there for so long. They're very dear to me, very dear people to me, as long as I worked there, because I still worked there. I went back to work there. I worked there all through high school, and then I actually started working there at 15, and they sold the store when I was 35. Short of 6 years span when I was having kids and raising little ones, that I did not work. That was the only time I did not work there.
Do you remember what you were paid per hour there?
Oh gosh, nothing. $3 and something to start out with.
That was not an hour, was it?
Yeah, 3 something an hour.
Hour?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 3 something an hour back then. Mm-hmm.
You see all these hiring signs and the big prices.
Well, yeah, you come to work here, make $13 an hour, make $20 an hour. Why go to school? If you can flip burgers for $20 an hour, yak. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's, and paying back these college loans, of course, this is way off the interview, but paying people back their college loans, well, wouldn't I like to have some of that back from my kids? That same thing happened with where I went to work after Hedges. When they sold that, I went to work in Terre Haute at UAP Clinic. And I worked there for 28 years. I ran the business office at the eye center. And so I did coding, billing, insurance. I did, credit. I talked to people about their bills. I did everything.
You took a few complaints on that.
Oh yeah. I was it for 10 doctors.
Who was?
Just me. And so when I went to retire, nobody wanted my job. Nobody in-house would take my job because they knew how much work I did.
Well, I remember when Elder would go there. I remember seeing you different times.
I had an office right off the waiting room. Yeah. So, but and so once again, I put braces on 2 kids with no dental insurance, and then they got dental insurance for the employees.
It always works that way.
Story of my life.
What was your most really vivid part about working at the clinic?
I guess I would have to say the people I worked with. I just loved my coworkers. But you're a family, as one of my doctors said, and the doctors. My eye doctors were wonderful to work for, wonderful. And that one of the eye doctors said, "We are a family. You spend more time here with us than you do at home."
That's right.
We are your family. And when my grandson was hurt at a preschool in Terre Haute at 4 months old and ended up with brain bleed and in the hospital in Riley, when I got him, his parents were being investigated. It happened at his daycare. But everybody was investigated, everybody was interviewed. Even Cole, his brother at 3 years old, was interviewed, you know. And I had custody, temporary custody of him until all this was done by the state police. And when we came home from Riley, he had, what was it? Anyway, he had eye. He was seen by a pediatric ophthalmologist in Riley, and swelling on the optical nerve, So we came straight back to the eye center, and my doctor saw him, and he's like, "I will do this."
Now, I think, I may be wrong in saying this, but are most of the doctors now retired that were there at that
Oh
time?
gosh, the doctor, one's retiring the end of this year, one is still in there, and then Dr. Patel, our new doctor, he's young. He's just got young kids. He's just getting started. I trained him before I left. That was his first practice right out of medical school. And I trained him on this is how we want you to do things. This is how you're going to code these things, and da-da-da-da-da.
And you're going back to see if he's doing it that way?
I go back I go in and visit with, I'm still close to all of my coworkers, except there's so many I don't know now because I've been gone from, I was working there, it was 2015 when I decided to retire so I'd have more time to spend with my dad, who was 93, and we were taking him to dialysis. He was on his third year of dialysis. And I was working, and so I decided to retire, and I could help him out more, you know. And they were going to change their billing system anyway, and I only planned to work one more year, and so I thought, why learn all that for 1 year? I'm getting out now before I have to learn all this new stuff. And then my dad, I retired. He was at my retirement party, and 10 days later he died. Who would have thought? I don't think he wanted me to spend my retirement taking care of him. He was a great guy. He was a great guy. He and I were very close. Yeah, he was a great guy. But anyway, he did a lot of interviews for Eleanor Mackey here.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have hit one of his. Typed up, it's all typed up. It's pretty neat. So, but anyway, enjoy retirement. I mean, you know, it's wonderful. Who wouldn't?
Ever looked back and said, I wish I had?
They tried to get me to come back because actually the girl that took my place, it was a very sad story, came from the outside because, like I said, nobody in the house would take my job, and she came from the outside. She didn't quite learn everything but I could tell there was something quite not right with her. There was something going on, and she ended up with cancer, and she died 9 months after she took my job. And she was very young to have that happen to her. And nobody took my job after that. They just dispersed it among the office manager's doing most of it. But with what I did, the office manager decided she liked it. She took it.
She took it.
Everything has changed so much because now there's we had people downstairs that did follow up, and now they're all at work from home. This is a crazy world now.
Just don't follow that.
Everybody says you got out at the right time. You left it right. What they wanted, when she got sick, they wanted me to come back and help. But they had changed their coding system. ICD-9 was gone, and they picked up ICD-10, and it was all different. And I said, I wouldn't help you enough. You would have to help me. If I only worked a couple days a week, every time I came in, you would have to help me. And that would take you away from getting your job done. So there was no point.
It's not worth it either, is it?
I said I would not be enough help. So I did do it.
That guy named Larry, where did you meet him?
Oh gosh, one of my girlfriends introduced me to him after he came back from Vietnam.
Really?
He'd already been to Vietnam, back. And he'd only been home about a month when I met him. We dated for 2 years before we got married. I got married at 18. I did not encourage my daughter to do that. So, I don't know what my mother was thinking. Because she said, if you'll just wait till you're 18 to get married, I won't have to sign the papers. And I said, Larry, we can get married after I'm 18. So we did.
What did others say?
She just went, okay, I told you.
Oh dear.
So like I said, that's why I said I don't know what she was thinking. Because then after that first year, I don't know what I was thinking. But it's been great. 52 years. 52 years. And not very many of our friends that were married, our couple friends that we ran around with back then are still married. They're either, one of them's either deceased or they've split. A lot of them are deceased. A lot of the guys, a lot of Larry's friends are.
I'm proud to say yesterday was our 60th wedding anniversary.
There you go, say 60, yeah. Yeah.
It's a different world today.
It is, it really is. I'm glad to have lived it when I did. I worry about our grandchildren and the world to come. We're very faith-based family. You know, we raised our kids in the church, and they may not, with their busy lives, get there all the time now, but they know. They know. And I think that when their time, they'll be. My husband wasn't always in church every Sunday when we were younger. He worked 5 days a week. He wanted Sunday, you know, and I never pressured him. And one day he said, I'd go to church with you if you'd invite me. And I said, I invited you every Sunday. And I would come home every Sunday and say, we prayed for you today at church, all the people that were too dilatory to come. We prayed for you today at church.
He must have listened.
And so then he said, I'd go to church with you if you'd invite me. And now he goes more than I do.
Well, good, yes.
They say those converts are worse than born in, than the people that are born in. I used to hear that from the Catholics, my mom's Catholic, mom and dad's Catholic friends.
I think I know what church you go to also.
Yeah, I think you do. Yeah. And see, that's a family. I mean, that church, I have pictures of the inside of the very first church in my box of pictures. I am steeped in history. I have so much in pictures, in letters, in documents. I just have, there's things that I just can't weed through. There's tubs full of stuff.
Wow.
Between Cousin Mary, see, my great-grandmother's house, she moved into that house when she was 8 years old. She would say she lived, you know where Maxine Davidson used to live? On 3rd Street?
Yes.
Okay, that corner. They lived in a little house on that corner. Long gone, long gone, you know, back in the day, back in the 1800s. They lived there. And her father built this house where Burtons are when she was about 8 years old. And she was born in, let me get it right, she was born in 1870. And that house would have been built before Cousin Mary's house was built. So it was probably built in the late 1880s or 90s. And she lived there all her life. She's 78 actually. She moved there when she was about 8 years old.
And her name was?
Margaret Hogue.
Margaret Hogue.
Margaret Bryan Hogue.
Okay.
She married, her husband was William Hogue. And she had, so there they lived, and so she lived there for 100 years. And that house was never cleaned out in 100 years.
Treasure.
And then my mom and aunt started cleaning it out to sell it. In the rafters and the attics upstairs, the stuff that was stuffed back there. And so my mom one day came to me with a box. One of those boxes that you got your fruit of the month fruit in. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. She brought me that box. She said, you might be interested in these. And I kept the box for a long time before one night Larry had gone to bed and I had a light in my bedroom and I was in bed and I opened and I looked and I said, I had no idea that all these letters were in there, written by her family, my grandmother's brothers. There was three brothers and her. She was the youngest. Her brothers, and they had a hardware store in town, and her brothers were sent, one of them, they all got sick, okay? They all died in their early, like 20s or 30s from consumption, which we now know is tuberculosis. Mm-hmm. And one of them was sent to California, and the letters are from him telling the family how to sell off the hardware store and move out there for the cure. They were all moving out there for the cure. And he died before they all got out there. He died coming home on the train.
So did some of the additional family then go out to California?
Nope, we all stayed here. They all died right here, except for my grandmother, great-grandmother, who was supposed to die, and she lived to be 100.
Gosh, that's amazing.
Must have been a gene on the male side of the family. Yeah.
Because that would have been remarkable to attain that age at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. So she lived right there in that house where Burton's are, and so when they emptied that house, then so that's how I've ended up with and then I've got Aunt Cousin Mary's, all her paperwork, all her stuff. I got clothes of hers. I've got people's wedding dresses.
You need a bigger house.
I've got all this stuff, and what do you do with all of it? Everything's marked.
Have you considered a museum or something somewhere?
Yeah.
So that it's not cast aside.
In fact, there's been people that said we need to sit down and go through, but and my cousin Brian, he came and said, okay, I'm bringing all this equipment and we're going to scan everything and we're going to get it all digitalized, we're going to get it all put in. And then when I came down with the boxes, he said, this was on a Sunday afternoon, he said, oh my, we can't do this all today. Because you see, I have a box of my grandfather Lovett's father's stuff too. I have James Ashton Lovett's stuff too. And he was a newspaper reporter.
Okay, that was what I was going to ask you. I know I've heard that house associated with Lovett. And where does that fit into?
Temple Lovett married my grandmother. Temple Lovett was Margaret Hogue's son-in-law.
Okay.
See, my grandfather was, my grandfather Lovett, what a great guy. He was a traveling salesman. But first of all, he was in both World Wars. He went to the service. He was in both World Wars. And he left his family each time here in town to live with his mother-in-law, with my great-grandmother, Margaret Hogue. Because, my grandmother married her mother, her parents. They lived there when he went off to war. He was in the First World War, then he came home, and then he was in the Second World War. In between that time, my mom was born, And the house out west of town, you know, out there where Figbinders built the big house out there west of town, and that subdivision back there,
Yeah.
they owned all that property. That was one of the farms. And that big old house that used to stand out there where McConkeys lived years ago, they had a dairy farm. My mother was born in that house.
Okay.
And then they moved to St. Louis, and her brother Jimmy was born in St. Louis. She had a brother Jimmy, and he was born in St. Louis, and he only lived 3 months. And he died in St. Louis from pneumonia. And then when then they moved to Michigan. They went on to Michigan, and he was, Granddad Lovett was a traveling salesman for Gerber Baby Food. When Gerber Baby Food came out, he was the salesman that introduced it to grocery stores. Put it in, this is a new product to put in on your shelves for babies, baby food, okay? Introduced it to the country. One summer, and my aunt was born in Fremont, but my grandmother refused to have her at the hospital. She had her at home because she swore that Jimmy got the pneumonia at the hospital. So she had her at home. And then when she was older, my grandfather one summer took the whole family with him when he was working the East Coast of the United States.
Whoa.
And he had him and his wife and his 2 girls and his mother-in-law and his mother. 6 of them in a car with no air conditioning, traveling up and down the East Coast of the United States. You think that was fun?
Oh boy, that'd be an experience and a half.
My mom wrote about that in the book that I gave her to write in. And I gave her this book, and it was for memories. It was for tell me about your life, you know, da-da-da. And I gave her that book and never knew if she ever did anything with it. And then when my dad moved out of the house up on 8th Street, and we were going through stuff, I found that book and I took it home. And I looked in it. And then finally I looked in it and she had filled it out. Oh my gosh. I didn't know it till after she was gone. And it was like, what a link that I got. She gave me.
Sure, it's like a chain, it's a link of history.
Oh yeah, what a neat. You know, even those letters that I have from way back in the 1800s, Cousin Mary deciphered, because there were nicknames, and she told me who those people were when I read them to her. And then Wilfred Shaw had them, and he loved them. He said, what a link to your past. These are rich in heritage.
And the ones that I have looked at from old times, the script and the writing is beautiful. Every letter is so priceless.
And very flowery. If they talk about somebody's passing, oh my goodness, it's the great beyond and all the God. It's very flowery. It's neat.
But I've often thought the penmanship is just remarkable.
Yeah, and just like this one letter here, see, it's very hard to read because they didn't use punctuation. It just keeps going. It just keeps going, and there's no period, comma, dot, nothing, you know, it's just, so it's kind of, so Cousin Mary, I read them to her.
You know,
Cousin Wilfred figured them out.
that's what kids do today with the computer. They don't put in comments.
And everything's so abbreviated. I'm like, what are you trying to say?
Yeah.
I don't understand that. But anyway, But where were we when I got off on that subject?
Oh, you're talking about your relative going to California.
Oh,
And
yeah,
then one
we
went
came
to
back. Yeah, and he died, and they're all buried out there in the cemetery. But that's how come we have so much in that house, because nobody cleaned that house out for 100 years. And nobody cleaned Cousin Mary's house out for 100 years. She died there at 100 years old, too.
That's right.
She would tell me she was consumed there and born there. Born there and died there. Conceived there, born there, died there in that house. At 100 years old.
And you know, that's
Can't say that very
Marshall
much.
is possible, but I'd say most other places throughout the country.
No, you can't say that. You can't, not very many people can say that.
Number one, the building's probably been demolished.
Yeah. And so then I ended up with all her stuff. She didn't have near as much, really, history-wise. Mostly probably because she never married or had any children, and she was the only child.
Yeah.
That's how come, I mean, she didn't have anybody else. But by the time we had her, because I spent a lot of time with her, I like the older people. I just like, they're just so, I don't know, interesting, I guess. You know, I would up there and spend a lot of time. In fact, she was very, very good at changing with the times. And to be a person that never had children, she loved to have kids. And she had toys for them, and anything new that came along gadget-wise, she had to have one. I wish that she had been around for computers, because she would have loved a keyboard and a computer. She would have loved doing that. But I would go up there, and I would actually, when my kids got to be nosy at Christmas time, I just bought their Christmas presents and took them to her house. And then I would take all my stuff up there and set up a card table, and she sat there and she watched me wrap all their Christmas gifts, and I'd tell her what they are. And we would just she enjoyed that. She didn't have a family. She never did.
Did she get something like a microwave?
Oh yeah, she had a microwave.
Okay, you talk about her.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
she was
into it. She was into learning. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. She was very, we would say out of her 100, she went from lamplight to laser. That was her era, lamplight to laser.
Boy.
Era. Yeah. And so we would even go up, all of us kids, all the Lovett grandkids would go at Christmas time and decorate her house. She never decorated her house. We got her a tree. We decorated her Christmas tree. We did her foyer and stuff, and stuff on the porch for her, because she never had that. And
well, I remember the place was always decorated.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and then when I moved in there, I decorated everything. But we decorated, put a little tree up for her, because she didn't have a tree in probably 50 years. She never had a Christmas tree. She lived there by herself.
When I was writing the National Register nomination for our house where we used to live, she helped with some information. That helped us out with that.
Yeah, she would. Yeah, she's a
delightful person.
Oh, she was. She was. She just so, just easy to talk to, and she just understood. You could tell her a problem now, and she could grasp it. She was very understanding of your problems, and I would tell, I went to work at the clinic, and she was like, and then I got somebody to clean my house, and she said, "That's the smartest thing you ever did." So she was just amazing woman.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. I've been surrounded by amazing people in my family.
Runs in the family.
Yeah. And my grandkids and I are very close. I said, I don't know when I'm going to fall off the pedestal that they've got me on, but
I like that.
So, but we're very close. I'm very close with my kids. Yeah, so that's why I won't be living in Florida all year. I've got to be home for them.
Well, you might tell a little bit about your kids and your children.
Well, I have a daughter who's married and has 2 sons, and she right now is a senior executive director in 31, which is a what do you call them? She sells products, out of her home, 31 products. So direct sales, I think they call it. I don't know, but anyway, and Kelly Livix and Josh Livix is her husband, and then she has Cole and Calvin Livix. And Cole works. He's 22 and he's working. And Calvin just started as a freshman at Rose Holman. He has designs to be a chemical engineer.
Good for you.
Yeah. And then my son Kyle and his wife Julie have a daughter, Brooklyn, and a son, Coy. And Brooklyn is my only granddaughter, and she's just like me. We are carbon copies.
Look like one of those pictures.
Oh my gosh. She knows it. She knows she's a mini me. And I told Julie, my daughter, I'm so sorry. Because even Julie's family says, "Oh my gosh, she's just like you." And I said, "Who wants people going around saying your daughter looks like your mother-in-law?"
And where do your children live?
They both live on, Weaver Road, out off of 40. You go that way to Denison, and you go that way down the Weaver Road, because Weaver store used to sit right there. That's why it's called Weaver Road. And they both live within about 2 miles of each other down that road. They built homes. They both each have a little farm.
I had an uncle and aunt that lived down the Weaver Road.
Oh yeah?
Julia and Vern Pickens. They lived on past where Dr. Stoling was.
Yep, on past Stoling,
Past-
go down the hill and come up the hill. And
No, they
that's,
lived on the east side of that road.
and then Kelly and Josh are on the east side of the road. They built a house in the middle of the woods.
Okay.
A McGee farm.
Yeah.
They bought a piece of property off of that farm. It was all wooded, all timber on the other side of the road, because they said they would not divide that property up, that farm up, and sell it in pieces. And Kelly copied the plat book and showed them that this piece is already divided off, and there's no tillable on it. It's already on the other side of the road all by itself. She wanted to buy it, and so they sold it to her.
Good.
She went after it. I said, "They're not going to come looking for you, Kelly. If you want to buy a piece of property, you're going to have to get out there and look for it."
Sometimes it just takes that real push to get something accomplished.
And she did it. And so they built a house there, and then about 2 miles on down, you turn on Fishback Road, Fishback, and Dog Run Holler, Cooper Chapel
Used to be a-
Road. That's where Kyle and Julie live.
It used to be a fishback school.
Yeah,
West side of it,
yeah.
it's a long time ago. Long gone.
Yeah. Kyle said he's gonna run for mayor of Bullskin. They live down in there. They live down in there. And my daughter-in-law teaches school in Terre Haute. And my son works at the prison, federal prison. He's an electrician, and he's a U.S. Marshal because he's on the special operations team that moves prisoners or goes into. He's been called out for looting after hurricanes into Florida when they had hurricanes down there.
He works with the nice guys there.
Yeah, and when they had the riots in Washington D.C., he was on top of one of the FBI buildings, and then he ended up. That was the first night. The rest of the time he spent in front of that church where President Trump had his photo op across from the White House. He was there. So he's had a lot of experiences in his 45 years, but he's actually an electrician for the federal pen.
You've got a lot of interesting history, Mary Jane. Is there something in history or in the past that really strikes my memory and just maybe even changed my thoughts in my life?
Well, I don't really think so. I'm a very easygoing person. I tend to be like my dad. He was very easygoing. I have had a lot of influential people in my life that I miss dearly.
Is there
Now,
one of them that have been most influential?
well, I might say Omer Schaller. What a great guy. Like a second dad to me. I grew up with Omer and Jenny. And then I took care of him in the end. I was with Jenny the day she died. I was taking care of her that weekend. And I was in Florida, and I had just talked to Omer the night before he fell. He had called me down there in Florida, and we had a long conversation, and the next morning he was found on the floor. And great people in my life. I had a lot of great people. My grandfather Levitt, he was my best friend. a little girl's best friend.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
Now, Mary Jane, you mentioned you live in Florida part of the year, and we do too. How do you find the people there versus the people in Marshall?
You know, in our gated community, we have the best friends. We have a busier social life down there than we do up here. But we dance. My husband and I, after our kids were grown and gone, and we retired, said we weren't doing ball games, running all the time with kids, said we need to find something for us to do. So we take dance lessons. And we take dance lessons at the senior center in Terre Haute. And then we have a whole new group of friends from there. And then we dance on Saturday night at the Moose Lodge in Terre Haute with them. So we have developed so many new friendships from the things that we are trying to stay active in our life, in our retirement. And it's been such a blessing for all these new friendships that we have.
That keeps you young, too.
And so now, and then in Florida, in our gated community, we dance down there too. And there's a guy that we like, that we follow, from different places venues where he plays in the town we're at down there. And whenever he sees us come in, he knows what songs we want him to play, because what songs we're going to dance to.
And what community is that?
We have a place in Okeechobee,
Okeechobee.
on Lake Okeechobee, in the town of Okeechobee. And our gated community is Ancient Oaks. And there's about 9 couples from Marshall that are down there.
Yeah.
There's about 9 couples of us. But you know, we may all have ended up in the same gated community, but there's days when that go by that we don't, unless we see them at the pickleball court, because we play pickleball. So we can play pickleball every day of the week down there. We built 2 courts in that park. Our little pickleball group had to raise the funds for it, to build it. And it took us a few years, but we got it. And so we have a whole group of friends down there that we either dance with or we play pickleball with.
Great.
So we are blessed with numerous friendships. And then in this new neighborhood that I live in, we have wonderful friends, neighbor friends. And Lois Lettner is very dear to me. She's lives across the street from me. She lives in the house in between the 2 houses where I used to live.
Boy. You made a full circle.
I did make a full circle. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. I love the new Marshall pool. What a tribute to my grandfather. Oh my gosh. You know, he was instrumental in the first pool that was built, and he was the manager of it for the first few years. He managed it. I was in that pool a lot, all the time before it opened with him.
Before it opened.
I was his little shadow. I was always with Granddad Lovett. I was his little tomboy, you know, and I was always hanging out with him. And when they were getting it ready, I can remember being in the bottom of that pool when the guys were painting it, Larry Wells and Mike Macy. One of them painted my foot because I didn't get out of the way. I might have been a pest when I was a little girl.
Surely not. Surely not.
Yeah. And anyway, the pool is a wonderful tribute to our community and to my grandfather. He would have loved that pool, and I love it. I go out there. I go down that slide. I love it.
You're talking about the new one.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it's cool. I love it. I may be 70 years old, but I'm not done yet.
I remember as a youngster that I went to the Casey pool. Had one. It was kind of small, it was round, but I love the slide. And I know one year I wore the seat out of a pair of swim trunks, just going down the slide.
Just go down the slide. Yeah, I grew up being a water. I will say that my family, probably one of our biggest traditions that we've carried on from my grandfather is to go to the sand dunes in Michigan every year. He started that when my mom and the aunt were little. There was always a Sunday drive. It was always take a Sunday drive, because you were never idle. You were never allowed to just sit and be idle. And so they'd take a Sunday drive, found a little two-lane path through the woods, and came out at this lake and the sand dunes.
Beautiful.
And so that was when my mom was a girl, and we still go there. And our kids go there, and our grandkids go there. So many generations.
Is there a spot other than that you feel is probably one of the most beautiful places in the United States to visit?
Don't I'd say that's it.
Okay.
You get on top of that white sand, on top of that dune, and you look this way and you see Silver Lake and the green pine trees, and you look this way and you see Lake Michigan and the blue sky. Most beautiful place in the world. Not a cloud in the sky. Gorgeous. Yep.
Well, Jean, do you feel, is there an invention or a modern piece of equipment or furnishings or kitchen that has really changed your life, or maybe, well, you just couldn't live without?
Well, I could probably live without my Instapot. I'm having a terrible time with it. I feel like I have to go to college to figure out how to use it. I have finally mastered it, but it's taken me a couple of years. But I think really I like to cook. I do like to cook. I cook a lot, and I like to cook. I like to try new things. Yeah, that's why I bought the Instapot. But I don't know any one thing.
Not even your washing machine, huh?
Well, see, I've always had one. Just like people say to me, I mean, my house is full of antiques. Oh, that's beautiful, that's beautiful. And they're family antiques, and I've lived with them all my life. So really, I'm not wowed with the antiques, because that's all I've ever had. You understand that?
Oh, yes.
You understand that? I'm not interested in it, but going to auctions and buying somebody else's antiques. Every antique that I have has a history behind it, and it's a family piece. And when I moved out of the big house, I put out a text to my family and said, I cannot take everything with me. You need to come and get what you can use. And they did. They did. I didn't have an auction. I didn't do any of that stuff. I said, these are family pieces. They need to stay in the family.
I can remember my mother saying, antiques, forget them. I lived with that old stuff all my life.
Me too.
I want new things. And she just poo-pooed antiques.
I would say the only thing that I have in my house, besides a TV, of course, and the cabinet it sits on, my couch and my bed are things that I picked out. Of course, the washer and dryers and things like that, that you get new all the time, but the couch and the bed, it seemed like there was a third thing I picked up on. I said, oh yeah, and that little TV, I guess maybe it was it. But, I might have a hutch that's original to Cousin Mary's house. I have her music box, which is full of VCR tapes. I have the dry sink. I have the, what do they call it? Tureen, soup tureen. That's Cousin Mary's. It sits on the dry sink. I serve soup out of it. I use it.
Good.
The quilt on my bed in Florida is one of Cousin Mary's quilts that one of her family members made. Why keep them in a box? I'm using them. I'm using them. I have the high-low dresser out of her. That was her Cousin Mary's grandmother's.
Ooh, her mother.
Mm-hmm. Cousin Mary's grandmother's that was in her room in the big house. They had all lived there. I mean, her parents and her, I even have the rocker that Nineveh Shaw's wife died in. Nineveh's the mother of all these.
Yeah.
I even have the rocker that she was sitting in when she died. Cousin Mary had it, and she told me the story about it, and I kept it.
That story's written down then?
It's underneath the rocker, the bottom of the rocker.
So it's associated, definitely someone could tie it together.
Yeah, there's a little bit more to it than what is written there. She was ill, and she was at her daughter's house, sitting in that rocker in front of the fireplace. And she passed away while she was sitting there in that rocker. And Cousin Mary's, was it her mother or her aunt? Her mother sent one of the girls to get her brother, one of the boys, like William or Albert or somebody, to come. And while they were, to keep her from falling out of the rocker, she tipped it back and took a piece of wood that was laying there to be put in the fire and put that piece of wood under there so that the rocker, so she didn't fall out. Now that's the story Cousin Mary told me about it. And I said, when she told me that story, I said, I want that rocker. And I have it.
I mean, it's funny, but that's so typical what happened.
Tipped it back and put a piece of wood under it till help could get there. And then there's a break in it that was mended, and it was caused by two of the kids tipped it over playing in it and broke off one of the, and so it's mended. It's got you can see where it's mended, where they put it back together. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So these
I have a lot of history.
These things now that you have in the way of furniture, and you said now the rocker, you had a story and it was attached. Have you got stories written down about the other pieces?
No, because I don't know stories about the other pieces. Nobody told me any stories to go with any of the other pieces.
But
that's the one that had the story. Yeah.
You can say you may have known at least who had it or where it came from.
I do know that the bedroom outfit was that I have the high-low dresser from was Cousin Mary's grandmother's. I know that. And that's all I know about it was whose or what, who it belonged to. But the hutch that I have, we found the bottom of it was in the upstairs of, Cousin Mary's house. And the top was painted white and hung on the back porch and had cleaning supplies and all that stuff was on the back porch. And one of my friends was there one day, and she's like, I've got to see the attic. I've just got to see the attic. And so I took her upstairs. I said, I don't care. You can go up in the attic. And she was up there, looking around, and she saw the bottom, that bottom piece. And she said, the top to that piece is down there in your back porch, painted white. I had never put that together. So then I was like, oh, look at that. So I said to Larry, told him about it, and so we took it down and just got a modern, just plain old cabinet and hung up there for cleaning supplies and stuff, because it was where I had the stuff for my soap and stuff for wash and dryer was below it. And so then we took it down and Mark Green stripped it, and then we put it back together and reused it. It's great. Love it. Love the piece.
A and B make up a full piece, huh?
And at the same time, when we first moved in there, we were up in the attic just digging around. Larry and I were with a flashlight, just looking around to see what we could find. And back under the rafters, we found these things. We thought, what are those? And they turned out to be the tops to the fireplaces.
Oh, some of those are very ornate.
One was massive and one was ornate. The ornate one was went in the parlor, and the massive ones went in the living room, what we used for a living room. And then there's just a short piece that went above the dining room fireplace. And both of them had the mirrors gone out of them. The two pieces had the mirrors gone out of them. Unbeknownst to me, when we moved in there, and I said, you can come get pieces, because twice I gave pieces out of that house to family members. And what they had done was took the mirrors out of those tops and put frames around them and hung them on the wall. And then I gave them away. And then I couldn't get them back.
Did you replace the tops off the fireplaces and put them back?
We put them back. We had them cleaned up and put them back. And then had new mirrors. We had to have mirrors cut for them. We couldn't get the beveled mirrors back because they'd already, people had them, wouldn't give them back. I don't know anybody in Mason City, Illinois.
You must get as many as we do.
I'll go in there and block it. If they don't leave a message. So.
Well, Mary Jane, it's been a delightful.
It has been. Because, I love talking about history.
Well, I do too.
And who doesn't like talking about their family?
I love to hear the history, so it's just been a delight visiting with you.
And I think I have an interesting background.
Oh yeah.
My family background here in town is very long, and I think it's an interesting one.
I'll ask you one question to kind of wrap up. If you were in another foreign country and someone said, Marshall, where's that? What would you tell about Marshall and why it might be a good place to visit?
What would I tell them? Well, I don't know. I would say it's a quaint little town. We tell people this all the time, not in Chicago. When they say, where do you live?
Illinois.
We say Illinois, not Chicago.
Yeah.
We say East Central Illinois on I-70. And if it's a truck driver, everybody's been through Marshall. Everybody, any truck drivers all know Marshall. And no matter where they lived before, if they were a truck driver, they drove 70. But I would just say it's a great place to live. I'm proud of my town. I'm proud to live in Marshall.
I'm glad to hear that, and boy, you emphasize a lot of things about Marshall that other people should be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've always been proud to be from Marshall.
Well, I sure enjoyed visiting with you, and thank you for your time.
Sure.
And sharing some of the family history.